reality. I'd like to call the attention of the committee to the testimony of Michael Mukasey, who was brought as a witness for Senator Sessions and testified under oath about his experience as Attorney General of the United States. I did not vote for him because of his position on torture. But I respectfully tried to ask him questions. And I went to the question about the Russian involvement in this last election campaign and asked him specifically about the FBI investigation of this Russian involvement in the campaign. Michael Mukasey, with a brevity of words, said, "The FBI works for the Attorney General." As Attorney General, Mr. Mukasey, did you have the authority to stop an FBI investigation? Yes. So many of us wrote a set of questions to Senator Sessions afterwards. Will you use your power as Attorney General to impede an investigation of the Russian involvement in this last presidential election, or even stop such an investigation? Do you know what his answer was? He said he did not have the time to read the unclassified intelligence memo, which we have all read, that summarized this Russian involvement. That is either willful blindness or willful ignorance on his part, not to realize the gravity of this. What happened in this presidential election on Election Day was a day that will live in cyber infamy. This was an attempt by a foreign power with values inconsistent with the United States to change the outcome of our election, specifically to benefit the current president and to defeat Hillary Clinton. Is that worth an investigation? I came to the Senate 20 years ago, as did Senator Sessions. And when I arrived in the Senate as a member of the Government Affairs Committee, we were welcomed into a hearing chaired by Fred Thompson of Tennessee, Ranking Member John Glenn, and the question before us 20 years ago was the involvement of the government of China in the Clinton-Gore campaign. We spent months in public hearings on that question. Because of some ham-handed decision by the Clinton-Gore campaign, God forbid, to accept campaign checks from Buddhist nuns, there was nothing that pointed to the involvement of the Chinese government, but we went on for months. And months later, formal reports were issued. And yet, look at the response of the Republican majority now to the suggestion that the Russians were involved in this presidential campaign, a fact which every major intelligence agency of this country has confirmed. Do you see the same kind of anger and commitment and excitement? Not at all. They've dismissed it with a boys will be boys shrug. The only hope we have to ever get to the truth of this is a thorough FBI investigation. And now we are being asked to appoint an Attorney General who will not give us his word that he would not stop such an investigation or impede it. That, to me, disqualifies him when it comes to this important responsibility. And so I come to this conclusion, despite my personal relationships, my working with Senator Sessions, my respect for his family, that he is the wrong person for this job. We need someone with unquestioned strength, values, and integrity, who at that critical constitutional moment is prepared to stand up to this president or any president and say, you are wrong, and if you insist on doing this, I will resign. I cannot picture this man who has been described by the Trump advisors as a savant and legendary, having the will or determination to do that. And for that reason, I oppose the nomination of Jeff Sessions as Attorney General of the United States.
Senator Corner. Mr. Chairman, I remember Senator Specter, when he was chairman of this committee a few years ago, made the observation, thank goodness we don't try people in the courts of law based on the sort of flimsy and incompetent and hearsay evidence that we use in order to make public policy arguments here in the Senate. I guess you could call them alternative facts. Our friends on the other side seem to be upset about the outcome of the election on November 8th. I guess you could say they're going through the stages of grief, denial, anger. I think that's where they are right now. They haven't yet come to bargaining, depression, or acceptance. So they're angry. That's their right. But they don't have, I think, the freedom or the right to make up or to characterize motivation in the way they have, either of the nominee or the administration. You know, 37 Democrats voted for the omnibus appropriation bill in 2016. The reason I bring that up is because it had a travel ban. A travel ban from people from Iraq, Syria, and other countries that were related to or involved in international terrorism. So 37 Democrats voted for a travel ban from some of the very same countries now that they are decrying, that is the subject of the executive order signed by President Trump. Now, I'm glad General Kelly, Secretary Kelly, revised that to exclude legal permanent residents unless there's derogatory information that would justify that. I think that's the right thing to do. But the faux outrage of some of the same people who voted for a travel ban from some of these same countries is a little hard to take at face value. One of the reasons why the election turned out the way it did on November the 8th, in my view, is public backlash over a failure of the Obama administration, and particularly the Holder and Lynch Justice Departments, to simply enforce the laws, whether there are immigration laws, where they prefer to, we kill terrorists rather than capture them and question them, claiming that somehow to be a morally superior position. We know that Attorney General Holder, of course, was the first, I believe, in history, Attorney General ever to be held in contempt of Congress for failing to comply with our oversight responsibilities. And now the idea that Deputy Attorney General Yates has somehow engaged in a Watergate-style act of political courage, what she should have done if she couldn't do her job was to quit, to resign.
That's right.
To read this letter where she acknowledges that the Office of Legal Counsel reviewed the legality of the executive order and said it was lawful on its face and properly drafted, for her then to take the position that it was her prerogative then to say the United States would not defend the executive order in a court of law is completely unacceptable. So her choice was to either do her job or to resign, and if she wouldn't do either one, I believe President Trump was entirely within his rights to fire her. And it's really a shame. I voted for her confirmation. She's had a long and distinguished career, and I hope she's not remembered for this blemish on that long and distinguished career, but for the good that she's done. So I said during the hearing on Senator Sessions that it really is surreal to sit here and listen to colleagues characterize somebody who we know personally and we served with for many years. In the case of the Democratic whip, for 20 years. I've been here 15 years and served alongside of Senator Sessions, as many of us have, for a long, long time. So this isn't just a question of what his record is. We know his record. We know his resume. But as I said at his hearing, I said, we know his heart. We know him to be a good and decent man. And the idea that because he voted for or against different policies as a legislator, that he can't keep his oath to enforce the law is preposterous. I've had the great privilege of serving in 3 different departments of government: as a judge for 13 years, in the executive branch for 4 years as Attorney General, and now in the legislature. We all understand. I mean, since the founding of this country, what the differences are between the branches of government and what the responsibilities are of people who hold those offices. I have every confidence that Jeff Sessions, as the Attorney General, will enforce the law of the land. And all the political and policy differences that our colleagues have on the other side, I think, really is more a reflection of their disdain and their upset over the fact that President Trump won the election and their preferred candidate did not. But the scene was vastly different back in 2009 when President Obama was sworn into office. President Obama was not my choice for president, but he was my president. And he selected a cabinet. And we confirmed 7 of them on the first day of his office. But now the tables are turned. Our Democratic colleagues have decided that resistance is their chosen response. Well, I hope they get beyond the anger that they're currently feeling, and I hope they work their way to accepting the verdict of the American voter and the American people. And yes, Hillary Clinton won the popular election, but that doesn't make a hill of beans worth of difference. It's the electoral vote, and they know that, but of course they keep bringing that up as if that somehow delegitimizes the victory of President Trump and Vice President Pence. So I hope at some point our Democratic colleagues will get past their anger and come to accept the verdict of the American people and work with us. This boycotting of markups like we saw in the Finance Committee, where we had 2 cabinet nominees that couldn't be even voted on because our Democratic colleagues boycotted the markup, have denied President Trump 2 more of his cabinet members. Our Democratic colleagues like to point to the fact that there have been some missteps at the early stages of this administration, but one of the reasons I suspect is because he doesn't have his team in place. And so they continue to criticize them, even though they deny them the very team they need in order to do their job. So, Mr. Chairman, I will enthusiastically support the nomination of Jeff Sessions as Attorney General. I believe he will restore the rule of law to a Justice Department that's been ruled by the political arm of the previous administration for too long.